Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to jump straight into the video and I'm going to jump straight into what we're talking about because it's going to be potentially quite a long video, and by long I don't mean like hours, but we've got some stuff to discuss. You can probably tell from the title of this video that we are going to be talking about plus size characters in novels and the idea of thinspiration or weight loss characters, what it means to write bigger characters in books and what it means as a reader to engage with those characters. So I'm going to start this off right now with a trigger warning. If you are somebody who is triggered by talks of weight loss, weight size, big bodies, discussions and narratives around what it means to live in a big body, fat shaming, that kind of thing, then this isn't the video for you. There will not be absolutely a single shred of fat shaming in this video, and if there are fat shaming in the comments, I will be deleting them because there's no space for hatred in the world. That being said, it is going to be part of the discussion. So whilst this is a safe space for people who live in bigger bodies and have maybe experienced fat shaming, thinspiration, or that kind of thing in their lives, it could be a bit upsetting just in terms of like you've personally been triggered by the themes and the topics. So it's not intentional. And like I say, this is a nice supportive environment, but we are going to be discussing those themes. So I've said the word thinspirational a couple of times, and the video that we're going to be looking at today is going to look at kind of 6 books in detail, but generally have a discussion around what it means to write books that focus on plus size characters or bigger characters or fat characters, and what it means for readers who are engaging with those narratives. I'm probably going to say people in larger bodies or larger bodied characters because I have my own hang-ups with the word fat and are not hugely keen on the term plus size either. So I'm probably going to say people in bigger bodies. That's my own terminology, that's my own choice. So because I am a person in a bigger body. So thinspirational is something that I've been using for some of the books in older decades that I'm going to be looking at. We're going to look at 6 books in total, but there are 2 books from the 90s, early noughties, 2 books from like the 10s, the kind of late noughties, early teens, and then 2 books that have literally been published within the last few years. And the idea with that is that we're going to track thinspirational narratives. And what I mean by thinspirational is books that promote weight loss or books that promote you being in a bigger body as negative versus losing weight or transforming or being thinspired in some kind of way by a character's weight loss or a character's change aesthetically. And we're going to look at that, how it differs from the 90s and the noughties up to where we are today and what problems they pose for readers, which, to be fair, there is hope. The narrative is changing. We are not seeing as many books now that focus on bigger bodies having to change in order to get their Cinderella moment, for example. So the idea for this particular video actually came from a video that I did before Christmas about Jacqueline Wilson's book series. So Jacqueline Wilson wrote a series of 3 books and they were called the Girls series, is how it was kind of collectively termed. There was Girls Under Pressure, Girls Out Late, Girls in Tears and Girls in Love. So there were 4 in the series, even though I'd literally just said a series of 3 books. It was a series of 4 books, sorry. And I read them as a teenager and I loved the books. I really loved them as a teen. But there was one book in particular that really stands out in my mind, and it was Girls Under Pressure. And the main character, Ellie, was at the time described as being fat. I mean, I reread these books recently to see how they'd aged, basically. Spoiler alert, they've not aged well. If you want to see that, then you can go and I'll do an iCard and you can go and watch that video separately. But the idea was really that I, as a teen, was thinspired by Ellie's story. And Ellie, in this particular book, her character decides to lose lots of weight and she actually ends up becoming bulimic or borderline bulimic throughout the story. And the kind of moral of the book that, you know, we should accept ourselves no matter what size we are, and that there are healthy ways to lose weight and non-healthy ways to do it, all that all went over my head as a teen, and all I wanted to do was have that transformation, have that weight loss. And it got me thinking, I wonder how many other books are like that. How many other books did I read as a teen and as a young person that thin-spired me, that had a transformational message, that had a if only you lose weight all of your dreams will come true message. And that really intrigued me. So I did a little bit of research and I realised that there were at least 3 books from the 90s, early noughties, which were my kind of teen years, that really were heavy on the thinspirational messaging. And so I was like, okay, so it clearly was happening when I was young and impressionable and young. I still think I'm young now, but when I was really young, in my teens and my early 20s, that were definitely promoting thinness and promoting weight loss and promoting this Cinderella-like transformation. But I thought I'd have to do due diligence, really, and see how that narrative has changed over the years. So then I read, like I say, a couple of books from the late noughties, early teens, early tens, and then a couple of books from the present. So just a little tiny bit of a caveat, really, before we jump into it, to say that, you know, I'm not saying that I'm an expert in this area. I haven't been able to read every single book that features a plus size character from every decade. What I have done is done a study. Very geeky, I know. This is what I have found. These are my thoughts, these are my opinions based on this research that I've done and this reading that I've done. So the 2 books that I'm going to look at are, rather topically, Bridget Jones's Diary, which was first published in 1996, and Jemima J by Jane Green, which was published in 2000. I'll put the book covers up on the screen so that you can see what the book covers look like. These are the book covers that I was particularly familiar with when I read them. Obviously, book covers have changed since then, but these are the covers that I particularly read. So these are the 2 books, and I think most of us are familiar with Bridget Jones's Diary and the kind of treatment of body size throughout that book. Jemima J may be a little bit more of a niche book, really, but that has got a really, really heavy weight loss transformational narrative in it. So those are the 2 books that we're going to talk about now. So just a quick intro into the period, really. The 90s, the late 90s, very, very late 90s, like I say 96 onwards, and particularly the very early noughties, were a really strange time, actually. Technology was advancing really fast. It was the emergence of the internet, but it was still very young. I am of the generation, sadly, as I get older, that remembers what life was like pre-internet and pre-emails and that kind of thing. But I was also one of the youngest to start going on the internet, you know, having MSN Messenger and dial-up internet and all that kind of stuff, which is going to age me really quickly now on this video. But it was a time of transformation. It was a time of people becoming connected across the world. And it was also around the time of real press hounding of celebrities. You know, you think about the fact that Princess Diana was killed. There's all that kind of footage of celebrities being hounded by the paparazzi, and the kind of magazine headlines were horrendous about celebrities. There were, you know, celebrities were beach body shamed on the covers of magazines, and there was a really interesting clip recently of Kate Winslet talking about a red carpet moment that she had where she was in a dress and she had some really horrendous negative comments about her body made about this dress, and she's talking about it now as a woman in her, I don't know if she's in her 50s or 60s now, and she was upset, she was in tears now, kind of 40 years on from that moment. No, not 40 years, it would be probably about 20-30 years on from that moment. And she was in tears because it upset her that much to have her body shamed so publicly.
It's absolutely appalling. What kind of a person must they be to do something like that to a young actress who's just trying to figure it out?
Did you ever get face-to-face with any of those people?
I did get face-to-face.
What did you say?
I let them have it. I said, I hope this haunts you.
It was a great moment. It was a great moment because it wasn't just for me. It was for all those people who were subjected to that level of harassment. It was horrific. It was really bad.
And it was just horrific then. And I'm not saying it's any better now. There are still an awful lot of public shaming that goes on of people's bodies. But I feel like we're better now than we were certainly at the late 90s, early noughties. So I think, you know, all of this is going on in the mainstream media. You've got, you know, we're in the middle of the size 0 clothing period as well, where the kind of aesthetic, the ideal aesthetic was to look as thin as possible. If people have got that body shape naturally, then that's fine. But for people who live in bigger bodies, to try and live in and exist in a big body when you are being told that the aesthetic that is beautiful is the complete opposite, and you'll never be able to have that kind of body because your genetics, your body is just not made that way. It was a really tough time to be in a bigger body, and as a teenager growing up during that time in a bigger body, it was really hard for me, and I remember that viscerally. And so that kind of mainstream message does trickle down into other forms of media and into literature and into books and into films and that kind of thing. And Bridget Jones's Diary and Jemima J are both books, I think, that are definitely of that time period, because these books, I believed this before I did my research, and I am right, these books wouldn't be written in this way now. In 2025, 2024, these books would not be written in the way they are now, because the way that they're written is just, it promotes this idea that big equals bad, big equals unlovable, big equals you'll never get what you want in your life. And it's such a bad message. It's such a negative message. And, you know, teenage me, I feel so sorry for teenage Charlotte because I lapped that stuff up. I used to think, if I could only lose weight, I'll get this. If I could only lose weight, I'll get a boyfriend. If I could only lose weight, maybe this will happen, or maybe this person will want to see me. Or, and it's a really weird thing, because weight and bigness isn't something that historically has always been seen as such a negative. Body shape was not as scrutinised as it has been over the last 30, 40 years. So it's unsurprising, really, I think, that this trickled down into books, and this kind of new media and our connectedness through technology has meant that we're being compared an awful lot more. So let's move on to actually discussing the two books themselves. I do have notes here, by the way, so if you see me looking down at some point, or you see this in the bottom of the shot, I'm an imperfect person. So Bridget Jones's Diary, like I say, the first book was published in 1996, and it was a huge success. And whilst Bridget Jones's Diary isn't a book about weight loss, it's so tied up in who Bridget Jones herself is, and in a lot of the scenes and things that happen, and the narrative around Bridget, the way she's spoken about by other members of her family and by people around her, and it's so much a part of the narrative, even though it's not a book about weight loss. Bridget Jones doesn't have a transformation, but she is quite clear from the very opening of the first book that she is determined to lose weight, and it's all about not eating and diet culture, and fat shaming is rife in Bridget Jones's Diary. And I know that in the book, in the films, Renee Zellweger plays Bridget Jones's Diary, which, don't even get me onto it, Renee Zellweger, even though she put on weight to portray Bridget Jones, was not a big person in the Bridget Jones films. She was bigger than she normally is, but she wasn't fat. She wasn't huge. And again, that plays into the media side of it, that even when the first films came out, everyone was like, oh my God, she's fat. And now you'd look at it and think, she's completely normal. But our view of what it meant to be plus size, our view of body shapes was so skewed at this time that we saw weight much differently. But like I say, it's all part of the narrative around Bridget Jones's storyline. It's all kind of shaped about appearance, self-worth, and weight. There's quite a few moments in the Bridget Jones, and I'm going to kind of intermingle between the books and the films, really, because they kind of both have the same. They're very, very closely related. The films do follow the books quite closely, but there's a lot of really weird moments, like Bridget Jones in her massive knickers. And I remember at the time when he says, these are F me, absolutely enormous pants. And we all thought it was hilarious, but it was the way that it was put in there, the idea that she has to wear these big knickers in order to make her body smaller for people. And it fetishizes being big, is what it does, by him being like, oh no, I like them. Hello, mummy. And he's like, but he doesn't want to be seen with Bridget. He doesn't want to be seen with her publicly. What it does is it makes a big body fetishized, rather than it just being that he was attracted to her and he decided to go out with her. And there's little moments like that they just put this kind of subliminal messaging that no man should ever be visibly, publicly attracted to a big woman. It should be this secret thing that happens behind closed doors. And I know that we all hate Daniel Cleaver for that. That's the whole point of the book. But even Colin Firth's character, Mark Darcy, says it at some points. You know, that she dresses like her mother and this, that and the other. There's never, other than the one bit where he says, no, I like you just as you are. Other than that, there's not that level of either character going, wow, look at her. It's almost like, and I know that Bridget Jones is a rip-off of Pride and Prejudice. Well, not a rip-off, it's a modern day take on Pride and Prejudice. But it reminds me of that. I like you. Mark Darcy likes Bridget against his better judgments. And I think, what are the better judgments? That she's big? That she smokes like a fish and smokes like a chimney and drinks like a fish? Like, it's just one of those things. It's like, why did Bridget's character have to be plus size in order to make her somehow flawed? And this is the thing that I see a lot in these books from this period, is that if they were going to flaw somebody, put a flaw into somebody's character, fat was the flaw that people used, almost as if that made them lesser of a person because they were big. And I just think, I just didn't like it. And now seeing it now through a 2025 lens, I see it even more, and it angers me even more that fat was the flaw that they chose for Bridget, and that it was allowed, this book was allowed to be written that put so much kind of wider narrative around her and what it meant to be big. You know, there's the line with Daniel Cleaver where it's not Daniel, is it? It's the woman from the New York office or something that he's sleeping with. And she says, I thought you said she was thin. And it's just seeing these kind of things, it's all these little moments that add up. And then when you think, in the book, it actually does talk about how much Bridget Jones weighs. And do you know how much she weighs in the book? 9 stone. She wears 9 stone. I don't know what that is in kilos. American viewers, you're just going to have to go and Google it for the equivalent. But 9 stone. And she talks about having to go down to 8 stone to be acceptable. And I look at that now, and when I was doing the research for this, I was like, 9 stone? There are women, myself included, I will never have weighed 9 stone as an adult. I probably never will weigh 9 stone. So if I'm reading a book now and this book says Bridget was 9 stone and she was horrified at how amazingly fat she was and she needed to lose weight, she needed to go down to 8 stone immediately, well, that instantly makes me feel like absolute shit. Because I am never going to weigh 9 stone. I'm nowhere near 9 stone in size. So if that's considered fat by the merits of this book, then what on earth is my size? And it just, by reading it, I'm reading a book. For me, reading a book is escapism. It's pleasure. I enjoy reading. I love immersing myself in a new world. And if I start a book and instantly read that, well, my self-worth has just plummeted. I will finish reading the book and I will want to diet myself. I will want to put myself in a smaller body. And I'm a 36-year-old woman. I'm very confident in myself these days. I know who I am, and I'm learning to love my body in all of its size. But for a 16, 17, 18-year-old teenager, which is how old I was when I read these books, I remember having a profound effect on me, because what it meant was that even at kind of 17, 18, I wasn't 9 stone, I was nowhere near. And so it instantly made me feel like this horrible ogre of a person. And that's the problem. That is the problem with having a character that is quote unquote fat, but putting a distinctive measure on that fatness within that book. It means that instantly the reader has something to measure their own self-worth by, and it makes, you know, somebody who's reading that who's 8 stone who feels fat probably goes, oh great, you know, I'm not considered the same size as Bridget. But people who are smaller have the same kind of weight issues, and this is why I personally believe that you shouldn't have any characters where they talk about weight in a negative way in books. I'm going to come on to positive body movements later. So moving on to Jemima J. So this is the next book, and this was released in 2000. Now this book is the complete, I won't say the complete opposite to Bridget Jones, but this is a book that centralises on weight loss. It's a Cinderella story in many ways. Jemima J, the main character, has a huge transformation of her body, and therefore all her dreams come true. So let's jump into this one. And I really want to read out the blurb of the book to you because I think it's going to really set the tone for the novel itself and for what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to read from my paper. It says, Jemima Jones is overweight, about 7 stone overweight. Treated like a slave by her thin and bitchy flatmates, lorded over at the Kilburn Herald by the beautiful Geraldine, less talented but better paid, her only consolation is food. With that and her passion for her charming, sexy colleague Ben, she knows her life needs changing. But can Jemima reinvent herself? And should she? So that's the blurb. And then underneath, there's a quote from Cosmopolitan. And the quote says, the kind of novel you'll gobble up in a single setting. So there's a lot to unpick. First of all, the use of the word slave, not appropriate anymore to use in a blurb. But we've moved on. It's 20 years on from when this was written in 2000. 25 years on, really. But the review from Cosmopolitan, the horrendous review, the kind of book you will gobble up in a single setting. What that's saying is, fat girls, fat readers, fat girls, this is a book for you. And it's just the use of the word gobble. It's so visceral. It gives you such a, and it made me, when I read that again, when I was doing the research for this video, it made me have a shrinking feeling. It made me feel like this is what you should be reading. This is what you should be aspiring to. You should be thin-spired by this book, and hopefully you do the same thing. You do something about yourself that this character is going to do. And then starting the blurb off with there's something you need to know about this woman. She's fat, and not just like a bit fat. We're going to tell you she's really fat. And that's not what I need to know. That's not what I care about in a book. What I want to know is what the plot is, what's happening. And this book is still available. Jemima J, this book is still available. And it still comes without any kind of trigger warning. And I think that is horrendous because this book should be treated with so much caution. This book, I think I read it so many times that like the cover nearly fell off at one point. And the reason was because I was desperate. I was desperate to have my Jemima J transformation moment. And we'll go on to talk about it in a minute, but I read it almost not like a Bible, but like some kind of transformational story that somehow, if I read enough times, this idea of how to transform yourself might lodge itself in my mind, and therefore I might have this transformational moment as well. So in Jemima J, the main character, Jemima, is basically, she's overweight, and they obviously tell you that at the beginning, that she's very, very big, and she lives with 2 flatmates that are horrible to her. She has a job that she's constantly being passed over for promotion. She works at a newspaper. She's constantly being passed over for promotion. She is firmly in the friend zone with her colleague Ben that she's got a massive, massive crush on. And what these things do is it kind of says to the reader that in every area of Jemima's life, she's unable to succeed because she's big, because she's fat, because she lives in this big body. Her friends don't like her because she's fat. So if you're fat, you can't have good friends. She isn't being given a promotion at work because she's fat. So you're never going to succeed at work if you live in a big body. And Ben, the guy that she's in the friend zone with, he's never going to look at her twice because she's in a big body. What a narrative. What a narrative to promote, that the only way to get these things in life is if you put yourself into a smaller body. Now, these kind of presumptions that are made at the beginning of the book about her status quo, about the fact that she's miserable, she's living this life, but she's so miserable because she can't get everything she wants because she's fat. It would be fine if the way that this book was handled is that she realised that she could have all of these things and she stayed in a big body, but she just got rid of the shit friends and got some good friends. She walked out of that job and she got a job where she was valued despite no matter what she looked like. Or if she said to Ben, do you know what, if you can't see who I am around my fat, then fuck you. None of that happens. None of that happens in this book. It's very, very one-dimensional, is this. It's a stereotype of the sad fat girl, that if you live in a bigger body, you must not be able to succeed in life, in friendships, in career, and that you must be inherently really, really sad because you're fat. And it's, like I say, it's so one-dimensional, it's so insulting to people who live in big bodies. You know, I'm a 36-year-old woman. I live in a big body. I'm a size 22, 24 in UK sizes. So I'm very much in the large size category. I'm a large woman in a large body. But I've got a successful career. I'm moving very close towards my dreams. I'm married to the most incredible man who loves every inch of me. And I'm happy. You know, I haven't always been, maybe because I was reading bloody books like this. But I am now getting so much more confident in myself and in my body. And it's just so infuriating to read a book where fat equals sad, fat equals failure, fat equals unloved. Because it's so far from the truth. It's so incredibly far from the truth. And the thing is with books like this, the more people read books like this, the more that this is the narrative that is put out in the media, the more that individuals believe that that's the way that they should think. Or it's not even that they believe it. They start to think that without even realising that they're being guided by the media, by magazines, by books, by TV shows, by films. And it's just so frustrating. At least it is to look back on this time period now. I really hope that these books aren't still being picked up by young, impressionable women and men. I'm talking very much about women, and I probably shouldn't, but I can only go from my own experience as a plus-size woman, and I think most of these books are read more by women than men, but obviously there are bigger men in bigger bodies as well, and this does apply to them just as much as it does to women. Yeah, as I say, 16-year-old, 17-year-old Charlotte was hugely inspired by this book, and the reason was because in the rest of the book, Jemima J basically meets this guy online, and he lives in America, she's in the UK, and they get chatting online, they start this relationship, and then he asks her to go to LA to meet him. And before she agrees to meet him, she has a photo made up. Geraldine, the friend from the newspaper, has the studio, the graphic designers, make up this photo of Jemima J, and they take the body of a thin woman on a bike and Jemima's head, and then they Photoshop Jemima's face so that her face is thinner. It looks like she's lost lots of weight, and they put her on this bike and she looks happy and she looks thin and this, that and the other. And she uses this picture as like, she's like, oh my God, I need to become this woman in order for this guy to fancy me. And so she goes through a massive weight loss. It's a true Cinderella transformation. She goes to the gym and she works out and she stops eating the horrendously bad food that she was eating before. And she loses weight. Now, it doesn't show all of that process. It says that she's starting to do all of these things. And then all of a sudden it skips forward in time and she's thin. And she's become the woman in the photograph, and she's super thin. She looks like a model now because she doesn't have baggy skin, because there's no problems like that. You know, she hasn't lost so much weight that her heart's affected. She hasn't lost any hair during the process of her going on such an incredible crash diet. And this is all supposed to happen within a very short period of time as well. We're talking a few months, like maybe 2 or 3 months max, that she's apparently supposed to lose at least 7 stone. Remember in the blurb it said she was 7 stone overweight. And in the book, she doesn't just become thin, she becomes a supermodel, which, let's remember, we're in the noughties, it's kind of a size 0 time. So we're supposed to assume she doesn't just lose 7 stone and become a curvy size 12, 14. We're supposed to assume she's gone down to like a size 8. She's super thin. She never looks like she's supposed to have been fat. And that's part of the story later on. She meets someone who's bigger and says, you know, I used to be in a big body. And the other person's like, no, you didn't. Because she hasn't got any of the things that mark us out as having lost a lot of weight. And so she has this transformation, she becomes super thin, she goes to America, she meets this guy, and it all looks to be fine on the surface at the beginning. And then it turns out that he has a fetish for big women, and he's sleeping with a lot of very big women and not telling Jemima about it. And he's got all these Polaroid pictures of really fat women hidden away in his cupboard. And again, it fetishizes the big body. It makes it, well, of course, no man in public is going to publicly admit that he likes a big woman. It's something that is hidden. It's something that's secret. And it all kind of ends well because Ben comes to America as well. This is the guy that she had the crush on. He sees her in her thin body and they fall in love and this, that and the other. And she comes back they move back to the UK together, both of them. And she is in the UK and her and Ben are together. But she doesn't go back to being fat. She doesn't go back to being the 7 stone overweight, as they told us at the beginning of the book. She says that she just has a nice round belly. Like, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. So there's still, the transformation has been permanent. And this is where my problem with, like, the deviation from something like Cinderella comes. Because Cinderella as a concept is the idea that she is a woman who is in servitude, and then she gets transformed for one night into what looks like a princess. She goes to the ball, she falls in love with the prince, and then he finds her. And when he finds her, she is as a servant again. She is covered in cinders. That's why she gets the name Cinderella. She's poor and she's in an impoverished state when he finds her, and he loves her anyway and says, you are the woman for me, no matter whether you're in a ball gown or in a servant's gown. You are my love. And that's the point of Cinderella. In these books, in transformational narratives, in inspirational books, that woman is forever changed. They lose weight and they don't put all the weight back on. They get everything they want, but then somehow at the end of the book or the end of the film, they're still thin, or they're still changed, or they still look so much better than they did before. And it's still subliminally saying, yes, but you still have to change to get these things. Yes, you've learned a lesson. Being thin isn't the be-all and end-all. But at the end of the day, it's not like that change is transition. Not transitional, what's the word? It's not like it's temporary. It's a permanent change. And so it's still telling you that those things can only happen if you lose that weight. Do you know what I mean? So, moving on. Let's move on to the kind of the late noughties, early teens. So, next books that I'm going to look at are Big Brother by Lionel Shriver, which came out in 2013, and Heft by Liz Moore, which came out in 2012. So, we've gone over 10 years since Bridget Jones's Diary and Jemima J were released. And I was interested. I was intrigued to see how the narrative had changed in 10 years when relating to plus size bodies, people in bigger bodies. And I was both disappointed and a little bit relieved in both things. So in this period, it seems to be a little bit of a transition. We've got one book, Big Brother by Lionel Shriver, that is very much focused on the negative side of being in a big body. I did not like this book for the way that it treated big people. But then you have Heft by Liz Moore, which is moving a little bit further towards that body positivity. It's about making big people more humanised and less of a like freak show problem that needed to be solved. And so I could see in this period that there were changes happening, that writers were choosing to change the way that they wrote about big bodies, but nowhere near as much as I'd hoped in the 10 years. Let's go on to talk about Big Brother. So a very, very quick rundown of the book. Big Brother by Lionel Shriver is a book about a female main character whose brother comes to stay with her, and as he arrives off the plane, she realises that he has put on an enormous amount of weight and he's now a very big fat man. And I think this book really intrigued me because the fat character, the very, very big character, is a male, and I was very intrigued to see how that would be written and treated, because most of the books that I read, the big main character was a female. So I was intrigued to read that. That's kind of why I chose it, really. The point of the book is that he comes to stay with her, and it's about her trying to connect with her brother and trying to solve his problem of being overweight, which, again, it's starting the narrative with the whole idea that being in a big body is a problem that needs solving. You are a problem. Something's not right. And Edison, the character who's overweight, he's failing in his music because you can't play music if you're fat, apparently, according to this book. Again, it just reinforcing that kind of stereotype that we saw in Jemima J. And then there is this whole transformational point of the book. The middle of the book is this transformation where she moves in with Edison, she gets like a little flat together, and they lose lots of weight, both of them, because she supposedly feels like she's big. So he mainly loses lots of weight and becomes very thin. And then the end of the book, she says, oh, none of that happened. And I was like, what? Like, none of it happened. He never lost weight. He came to stay with her for a very short period of time. Then she put him on a plane back to New York, where he'd come from. And then a few years later, he died from complications from being overweight. And the whole transformation never happened. It's very interesting because Lionel Shriver actually wrote an article for The Guardian that basically said that this book was written about her brother and her relationship with her brother, which was entitled, My Brother is Eating Himself to Death. And I get that she's got the personal experience, and that article, you can look it up, just put Lionel Shriver Guardian article, and you'll be able to read it. And her brother did die from complications to do with his health. And so I think Edison's story is very heavily inspired by this narrative that she's been through. And I get it, but I also found her article really triggering in the way that she handled fatness and the way that she spoke about being in a big body. She used phrases like, I have buckets of sympathy for the obese, often subject to cruelty, ridicule, denunciation and contempt. Fatties are the one subgroup you can still make fun of on the BBC and not lose your job. While discrimination against heavy people should be illegal, save when fielding, say, job applications to lead tourists up Mount Kilimanjaro. Like, those are just a couple of quotes from the article, and I thought, first of all, I don't like the idea for sympathy for the obese. She's collectively referring a group of people as if the obese is something that it's a single quality about people. And it just, that comment, and then a joke about, discrimination against people can happen when it's about applications for tourists to go up Mount Kilimanjaro. Well, actually, if you're fat and fit, you can go up Mount Kilimanjaro. It was just one of those things that I feel like this article very much tried to put her in the spotlight of being somebody who supports the existence of people in big bodies, she's trying not to be discriminatory, but a lot of her backhanded compliments or backhanded comments show that there is a level there of belief that fat equals bad. Still, even in this Guardian article where she's talking about her brother, the thing that really upset me with the book was the language that was used and the way that the whole story was crafted. And the reviews for this book seem to be really, really strong. People really like it. And I get, as a concept, the book itself deals with the human inability to actually act. The female main character never actually says anything about her brother's weight. She never solves anything, and in the end ends up losing her brother. He ends up dying because he doesn't solve his weight issues. So as a concept, as a narrative, as a study on that kind of side of human behaviour, I get it. But I do still feel like books like this should come with some kind of trigger warning or description that says this book is about this topic, but it's supposed to make you think about the way that human behaviour is. It's not meant to upset people in bigger bodies. And I think that's it just, all of the language in it, the main character is so unlikable because of the way that she reacts to Edison when she sees him. It's from the moment he arrives, she's talking about the way that she talks about the fact that, do you really want to eat that? Or that she wanted to cry when she saw him because he was in a bigger body. Like, just that reinforcement of that you should be pitied if you're in a big body. I found it really upsetting, and I would not have continued reading this book if I wasn't doing the research for this video. So there's a scene, like I say, right at the beginning when Edison first gets off the plane, there's a scene where the sister overhears two people talking about the fact that he should be charged double for the plane seat because he struggled to fit into his plane seat. Now, this is actually really triggering for me because I've had people make really horrible comments to me before on a plane about my size. dies, and I've, been really upset by it in the past. And I'll be quite frank, getting on a plane fills me with an awful lot of anxiety, not just because I'm scared of flying, but because as a big person, I have to try and make myself physically smaller, or as small as possible when I'm sat on a plane, in order to not take up too much space, in order not to be judged for taking up too much space. And it's a horrible feeling. You should never be made to feel like you should have to make yourself smaller in order to be acceptable. And so that scene itself really triggered me. And then when the main character sees him and realises that it's her brother that these people were talking about, she doesn't get enraged on his behalf. She doesn't think, how dare you speak about my brother? She doesn't fight for him in any sense throughout the book at all. Not even once. And it just really upset me. I just thought, gosh, is the only thing really that she is focusing on is his weight. There's no trying to talk about therapy or looking into his problems or trying to get to the bottom of what might be, don't look at the guy needs to diet. Look at what has led him to being overweight? What's led him to be so depressed or so down that he's put on all of this weight over a period of time? There's none of that. I was hoping for, I'm not going to lie, I was hoping for character development. I was hoping that by the end of this book, the female main character would be like, do you know what? I've completely changed my perspective. I shouldn't have thought like that. I shouldn't have been so judgmental about size. She's got this horrible husband who is like obsessed with being thin and obsessed with not losing weight. And his character doesn't change. He doesn't learn to be a bit more accepting of people at different sizes. He speaks to her like she's crap. And he's still speaking to her like crap at the end of the book. There was absolutely zero character development in the fact that if you're going to set up a big character, have some kind of change in the characters' perspectives, because otherwise vulnerable people are going to end up reading this book and taking a lot of the subliminal messaging to heart. I came away from reading this book and instantly wanted to diet, and that was me and my brain, the kind of hardwire of my brain from previous decades, going instantly into bad habits and being triggered back into old behaviour. That, oh gosh, well, Edison wasn't loved by his sister in this book, therefore why would anybody love me in my big body? And this is the danger of putting big characters in books in negative scenes and in negative ways, and not having any kind of character development from the people around them, any kind of acceptance, any kind of body positivity within the scope of those books. So moving on to Heft by Liz Moore. And I have to say, I think the title of this book is a little bit misleading, because I was researching books that had plus size characters, and this book came up time and time again. Everybody was saying Heft has got a big character in it. And then the title of the book, Heft, is an adjective that's used for bigness, and usually used for bigness in people as well. And so I was expecting it to be a lot more about weight loss. And actually there is a big character. Arthur is a big man who lives in a New York brownstone, and he doesn't leave. He hasn't left his house in decades. And the idea is that he's a bit of a recluse, and he eats a lot, and he's put on lots of weight because he's got an awful lot of different emotional problems going on in his life that's led him to overeat. And we do explore that within the course of the book. So the book is about Arthur. It's about his relationship with a woman called Charlene, and then Charlene's son. And the book is told from the perspective of Arthur and from the perspective of Charlene's son as well. And so you get these two different perspectives. And it's a beautiful book. It's a really lovely book in terms of talking about human character and how it's almost like a butterfly effect type book. It's how one person's interaction with another person can influence the rest of their life. And it's about, Charlene and Arthur's relationship and how he was in love with her. She was kind of in love with him, but they never quite got together. And then later on, the son is trying to find out who his real father is. And he thinks for a moment it might be Arthur. It turns out it's not. And it's just about that relationship, really. It's about him as a son and how he's learning, he's dealing with all the kind of psychological issues that his mother has and trying to grow up as a person. And then there's also the story of Arthur and how he's trying to he's living his life in New York. It's a bit of a complicated story because there's no real plot. And I don't mean that in, there's no storyline arc. There's no big crescending moment. There's no plot, as in it doesn't start at one place and end at the other. It just kind of follows these characters through their life. And like I say, it's a beautifully written book, but Arthur is one very small part of the book, and his weight is a very small part of Arthur's story. And so, in a way, I really do think that calling this a book with a plus-size character or about a plus-size character, calling the book Heft, is really quite misleading. And that might just be me being ignorant and not thinking about what the term heft means and the kind of wider implications of that word. It almost feels a bit like clickbait or read bait or book bait, whatever you want to call it. And it feels a little bit like it's been used to try and get people to read it because they think it's going to be about someone who's really big. When actually it's not. It's about human nature. And I suppose that's quite a positive thing as well. This is why I said that, you can see that the kind of narrative is shifting, the way that writers are writing big characters is changing. And it's quite refreshing, actually. Arthur, the first person in this study, does not lose weight, or he starts to lose a tiny bit of weight by the end of the book, but it's referred to literally in one sentence. One of the characters says, I've lost a bit of weight recently, and that's it. There's no, he needs to diet, he goes on some, kind of transformation story where he starts exercising and he starts doing all this kind of stuff. It's more, he starts talking about his childhood. He starts talking about the things that have led him to be where he is now. There's a lot more of mental health discussion in this book than mental health discussion just wasn't present in any of the other books, to be quite frank. So it was really refreshing to read about a big character where the bigness isn't seen as something inherently negative or that he needs to change. There wasn't this underlying, you must be thin. It was more, okay, this character is in this situation, he's big, how has he got there, and how is his character going to deal with his present situation? And there wasn't, like I said, there wasn't this narrative around, it's okay, all will be well in the end because he'll lose weight and his life will be transformed and suddenly he won't be agoraphobic, any of that. There was movement towards him having a more fulfilled life, but that movement towards having a more fulfilled life was because he'd opened up, he'd talked about his problems, he'd explored what had happened in his past, which helped him to move on into his future. I thought it was a really sensitive way of handling this kind of topic. And so whilst I think it's a little bit misleading to say that this is a book about a big person, I think it's quite clearly a movement in the right direction in terms of the way that a big bodied character can be discussed as part of, or can be included even as part of a novel, as part of a story that is being crafted by a writer. That's all I can really say about this book because, like I say, it wasn't hugely about weight loss or about weight. It was a much smaller element of the book than I originally thought. So, moving on to the 2020s, and I am thrilled. I am so excited to talk about this because I read two books. I read Fat Chan's Charlie Vega, which was by, oh gosh, I've not written the author down. Oh no, I've not written the author. The book cover will be up here anyway, so you can find out. So Fat Chan's Charlie Vega, and spoiler alert, by Olivia Dade. I'm sorry, I should have researched how to say that before, but again, the book cover will be up on screen. Now, these books are absolutely beautiful. I highly, highly recommend you read both of them. Both books have got big, fat, plus size female main characters, and the books are brilliant. They are so full of body positivity. Neither of the women lose weight and have a big transformation. They are big, they are proud, they are beautiful. And yes, both characters do deal with an awful lot of fat shaming in the course of the books. But the big transformation, the big change that happens is not the big character, it's the people around them. It's the people who are fat shaming them that are asked to change their perspective, change their discriminatory beliefs, change the way that they speak about the big character if they want to still be in the main character's life. Yes, This is what we need. These are the books that we absolutely need. So let's go on to talk about them in detail. So in Fat Chance Charlie Vega, the writer herself is a larger woman, and I think that's such an important point because all of the previous writers, Helen Fielding, Jane Green, Liz Moore and Lionel Shriver, they're all women in much smaller bodies. Not a single one of those women, from what I understand and having done a little bit of research online, not a single one of those women has ever lived in a heavily fat or heavily overweight body. So the fact that they're writing about big characters means that they don't have any lived experience of that. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have lived experience of every single character that you write about. That's what your imagination is for. But it's also what research is for. And also, you should just know as a human being, as somebody with empathy, as a grown-up, having been raised right, you should know that you don't talk negatively about big people. Even in the 90s and the noughties, you should have known that. And I think having a book written by somebody who has a big body, a larger woman, writing a character just means that it's going to be handled so much more sensitively. That woman is writing from her own experience, and I think that comes across in this book so well. And again, the same with Olivia Dad. She is a writer in a bigger body, and so again, she can write from her own experience. And I feel like both of these writers, and I might be completely wrong here, but I almost feel like these writers are writing the books that they wish they'd read when they were younger. So I just think this is what we need more of. This is absolutely what we need more of. So in Fat Chance Charlie Vega, the book is about Charlie, and she's still at high school, so I think she's supposed to be about 17, 18, something like that. So she's a very young character. And this was something that I actually found to be a little bit of a barrier. Obviously, I'm 36. I don't really identify with teenagers anymore because it's been an awfully long time since I was a teenager. I am thrilled to say that, spoiler alert, the second book by Olivia Dad is a 36-year-old woman. Hallelujah for romance books that feature older women. Anyway, let's go back to Fat Chance Charlie Vega. So she's in high school. In this book, she's a teenager, and at first I was feeling a little bit kind of not triggered by it, but I was a bit unsure when I started reading it because Charlie Vega does have quite a lot of insecurities about her own body, and she is worried about how people will treat her, and especially she has a mother who is very, very negative about her. She leaves out Slim Fast on the side for her to drink. She's talking about weight loss programs. She's a character she's desperate to be accepted for who she is as she is, and yet she's surrounded by quite a lot of fat shaming and like body negativity in her home life. And I was a bit worried at that point. I was like, oh God, please tell me that we're not going to have a transformation where she's going to lose loads of weight and finally become the woman that her mother wants her to be. Thankfully, that does not happen. What Charlie Vega does is actually stand up for herself in a really beautiful way. She joins the Instagram body positivity movement and, learns about what it means to be body positive in a big body. There's not a single weight loss in this book, and it is beautiful. And she's against diet culture, and it's so refreshing to read a book where the main character works on her body confidence and works on her self-confidence rather than working on getting thinner. It's just, this is how it should be. This is how books should be. I have read both of these books, and I felt like I've become more confident in my own body as a result of reading these books, and this is absolutely the way it should be. So this book particularly reminded me of why I started this video, really, why I wanted to do this video, which was about Jacqueline Wilson writing Think Again. So I told you about the books, the Girls series that she wrote. Those were written in the late 90s, and I read them as a teenager. But last year in 2024, Jacqueline Wilson released a book called Think Again, which is Ellie, the main character from Girls, now. So she would have been about my age. I think in the book she's about turning 40, and it's about her life now, where she is as a character now, 20 years on from the events that happened in the Girls series. And I was really disappointed with Think Again. And again, I've done a review of Think Again, so if you want to watch that video, you can watch it. There was still not as much body positivity. There was not much character development, and I feel like I've grown hugely as a woman in my own body positivity, in my own confidence. If you think about it, the character has moved from the 90s to the mid 20s, But so has the writing. The way books are being written has changed. Nothing about that main character of Ellie in Think Again felt like a millennial living in 2024 or 2025, and it was such a disappointment. And then I read these books, Fat Chance Charlie Vega and Spoiler Alert, and I was like, yes, this is what I want to Think Again to be. This is the character development. This is the kind of woman that I wanted Ellie to be by the time she was in her late 30s. So that was just a parallel, really. It made me think again, this is what I need. And I'm so thrilled that I decided to read the books from the different decades, because I originally thought that this video was going to just be a look just at the 90s books, and it was going to be dreary and it was going to be miserable because it was going to just look at how all the ways that plus size bodies are seen in a real negative light in books. But I am so happy to be able to say that it's changing and that body positivity is coming across in novels, and it's just so refreshing to see, and I'm so excited and I'm so thrilled for readers and for people in big bodies and for teenagers now to be able to read books like this and think that yes, they are worthy of love and they will be successful and they can find love and they can have it's you know, just because you live in a big body does not mean that you are less worthy of all of the beautiful things that happen in life. It's just that you happen to be in a big body in exactly the same way that my hair happens to be brown and my sister's hair happens to be blonde. She happens to be in a smaller body. I happen to be in a bigger body. We're both successful in our careers. We've both got partners that love us. We're both pretty great people, if I have to say so myself. We're both pretty hilarious. And that's what I'm seeing in some of these books now, and it's so refreshing and I'm so pleased. So it's not all doom and gloom is basically what I'm saying. So moving on to Spoiler Alert, this book, I have recommended it to 3 different people since I finished reading it yesterday. So that shows you how much I loved it, and I will be reading a lot more by Olivia Dade. Or Dade. Gosh, I need to find out how to pronounce her name first. I'm actually going to buy this book, so I read it on Kindle, but I'm going to buy it in paperback because I'd like to do a whole review just about this book because it's just so brilliant. I think that we need more 30s, 40s characters. The female main character, she's 36, and the love interest, he's nearly 41. It's just lovely to have characters of that age falling in love with each other and talking about their careers and their experiences. You know, she's having a career change in her life, and I related to that so much, and the feeling of, you know, going in a new direction from where you are because, you know, you change and you get older and you want different priorities and things. And then, you know, talking about, you know, there's some sex scenes in there. It's quite a spicy book, and it's, you know, all of these things are about body positivity. Now, the main character, the main character, April, she does have a bad relationship with her mother and her father, both around her weight. Both of her mother and father want her to lose weight, and she has a very, very poor relationship with them because all they can see is that her bigness is a problem to solve. But again, the way that she handles this in the book is to give them an ultimatum. Stop speaking to me in this way. Stop using this kind of language. Stop referring to me as a problem that needs to be fixed, or you will not be allowed in my life anymore. She sets boundaries, and that is, again, so inspiring to people who live in big bodies, who have people around them who constantly refer to them as a problem to be solved, who are constantly fat shaming them. You know, it's exactly what we need. It's exactly what somebody in a bigger body needs to read, because it gives me the confidence to set those boundaries in my own life and in my own personal relationships. And hopefully, again, like I say, any teenagers reading books like this will grow and mature and will get older and more confident in setting those boundaries for themselves as well. There's little moments in this book as well where April makes a list of all the things that she wants to achieve in that year, and I was like, oh, please don't let lose weight be on there. Please don't let lose weight. And it wasn't. It wasn't even anything that was on her agenda for that year, and I was like, thank God. She was just being herself, you know, and living her life in her body. And yeah, so like I say, I think it's really interesting that these books were both written with unsupportive characters in them. So there is discussions of fat shaming, there's discussions around the stigma that people in big bodies face every day, because it is true. I get it myself. There's so much stigma and fat shaming, and it's really, really hard as somebody in a big body to live in a society where you are told almost constantly and consistently that you are less worthy because your body is bigger. It's really hard. But to read books like this, where writers are making a conscious effort to write books about body positivity, is just absolutely thrilling to see. So my big kind of 3 points, I think, from this is, first of all, thank the Lord. Not that I'm particularly religious, but thank the universe that the narrative is changing, that books are changing, that we are no longer seeing fat shaming narratives of characters, and that actually body positivity is coming through into the books that we are being written and read now. The other thing is that I think a lot of books that are written this way, or have been written this way in the past, that show this kind of transformation, this Cinderella weight loss type thing, they're all written by women, which I think is really interesting. I struggled to find any books with a fat female main character that were written by men. So that's a really interesting thing. And I think I do believe that in order to write a good book with a body positivity message, I believe at the moment should be written by people in big bodies, just because they can, people who have that lived experience can write a book like that from a place of personal experience at the moment. But I do hope that all writers, no matter what their bodies look like, will start to, or will continue this movement towards not stigmatizing big bodies in their work, in their writing, and that it'll be more just this person who has a big body and this person has a small body, or if there is reference to their size, it's actually flipping the narrative, it's making it positive, it's addressing stigma in the book, it's addressing characters that fat shame and saying, no, actually, that's rubbish, you're not allowed to do that. That's, stop it, that kind of thing. And finally, I actually like that the books that we have are kind of written a little bit from the perspective of the person. So Fat Chance Charlie Vega is written in the first person narrative. I think that works really, really well because we get to see Charlie's own thoughts and the way that she thinks about herself, but it also means that we get to see the thought processes in her standing up for herself and her growth in terms of her own body positivity. Spoiler alert, is actually written in the third person, but because you kind of do get a shift in perspective, you do see that thought process from April as well. So I do think that whilst it's not quite in the first person, you get enough of that thought process as well. So yeah, I think I would like to see books like that written in the first person, but I think ultimately that's just a personal choice. So I have talked for a long time. Thank you so much if you've got to the end of this video, and let me know what you think. Are you going to read any of these books? Please don't read any of, I would say don't read any of the ones other than, you must read, spoiler alert, and you must read Fat Chance Charlie Vega. They're both brilliant books. They're really lovely books. They are much more about personal relationships than the romance. There's an element of romance in Fat Chance Charlie Vega, but it's more about her as a character and her character development. I would say Spoiler Alert is first and foremost a romance novel. It is a book about romance, but it's great. It's because the characters are older. It's got it's written in the world of like fan fiction. The main male character is an actor and the female main character is a fanfic writer, and so it's kind of got a bit of nerdiness in it as well. It just was everything. It was everything I wanted in a book and in characters. So yes, please go and read both of those books. Let me know what you think about the others. Let me know what you think about the way that having bigger bodies and fat bodies in books has changed over the decades, and what do you think, how do you think things are going to change in the future? I hope that we're going to continue with the body positivity, and eventually we will have books where we don't need to be addressing body shaming, but for now I think this is absolutely where we need to be. I think we need more books like Fat Chance Charlie Vega and Spoiler Alert, where there are some characters in there that are trying to fat shame, but it's addressed and those people are absolutely told to change or to keep their thoughts and opinions to themselves, because I think what that then does is reiterates it in the readers, it reiterates it in the culture, and so we as individuals change and get better as well. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you've got this far and you're not a subscriber of mine, please do consider subscribing to my channel. I was hovering around 1,000 subscribers when I filmed this, so I may be over the 1,000 mark by the time this video goes live. I may not, so please subscribe and you can become part of the community. I do also have a Patreon account and my patrons are scrolling the screen as I speak, and they are lovely. Thank you so much to my patrons for supporting this channel. It really, really means an awful lot to me. And if you would like to become a patron, I do bonus content and things over on that platform as well. It's a one-off fee per month. I don't have tiers or anything like that. And all the money that I make through Patreon goes into me upgrading equipment, paying for my time to be able to make these videos, and buying books that I will then review and talk about on my channel. So thank you very much. If you've got this far, let's put a heart. Put a heart in the comments for body positivity. Yeah, and I will see you in my next video. Thank you very much. Bye.